Saturday marks 20 years since the 9/11 terror attacks. In the days after the tragedy, we stood together as a country. We were united in grief, resolve, and patriotism. Tragedy often brings us together. Mental toughness expert Eric Rittmeyer, Marine, joining me now to talk about some lessons we learned from 9/11. First off, good morning to you, Eric, and thank you for your service.
Scott, you're the man. Thank you so much for having me back. It's good to see you again, buddy.
You as well. All right, let's go ahead and talk about those lessons and maybe how we can use those to bring kindness back to our nation. In some cases, we're rather divided now.
We sure are, Scott, and that's the sad thing, right? I mean, anytime there's any type of catastrophe or anything horrible that happens, it always seems to bring everybody back together. Unfortunately, it only lasts for a brief period of time, and then we end up going back to our roots again. So when these events come up and we have anniversaries like this, especially for September 11th, it really does bring back all these emotions. You and I spoke off air for a couple minutes. These things we remember so vividly. We cannot forget that feeling we had on September 11th.
Yeah, and I was down there maybe 10 days after the fact. We were with the first group that was allowed in terms of news media, and you're seeing some of the pictures there. The ash 10 days later was still falling. I went down there with a dark gray suit, dark black almost. It was white by the time I was done in about 2 hours. And the people there, it seemed like almost a cathartic thing. They wanted to talk. I think a lot of that leads to, the talk of gratitude, love, and connection that we had at the time.
It sure does, Scott. Here's the thing that everybody has to remember, right? We are all hardwired the same exact way. We're just different variations of the same core psychological blueprints. We all want love. We all want kindness. We all want peace. We want empathy. Our neighbors, we love each other. We're innately hardwired to love each other. We get to the stage, and we're at this point right now as a nation where we just have this outrage for no reason. Like, why do we get so upset? What we have to do is we have to go back and remember when times get tough, we rely on each other, regardless of whether you're related, if you know each other. Look at Ground Zero. Nobody there knew anybody prior to that day, but they would have done anything to help that person. We cannot forget that.
Yeah, we were looking at the list, two of those on the list, unconditional kindness and priorities. When I was there in New York, it's amazing. We often think of New Yorkers as somewhat standoffish. It was absolutely the opposite. People wanted to talk. People wanted to come together. Do you think that's possible? And also add to that list perspective.
Yeah, and this is where it goes back to, Scott, when you mentioned the priority piece especially, it's so crazy how when something bad happens, whether it be a health scare, whether it be something as horrible as September 11th, what happened in Afghanistan a couple weeks ago, these things help us put things back into perspective to say, you know what? I'm gracious for what I have. Let me reprioritize what's important to me. Getting to the gym and not getting in all my reps isn't that big of a deal. Eating a bad diet isn't horrible. Get back to priorities, family, friends. These are all things that, unfortunately, again, the further away we get from these bad events, the more we go back to just being in our silos and just being so concerned about us internally as opposed to reaching out to other people. It's a reminder for all of us that we all need love.
All right, let's not forget the final two on your list. Life is precious and strength. And we're not talking strength like those big muscles you're sporting in that shirt, but I assume that is strength of character.
It is, and this is the thing too, Scott. What we learn throughout these events is that we learn coping mechanisms. We learn ways to deal with adversity. The coronavirus is another example of this. It's skills that we're learning right now. As adults, we're learning new skills. I'm 47 years old. I'm learning new skills. When it comes to our kids, it's helping them to appreciate. And this September 11th thing, I think critically important is to let our kids know. My kids weren't born yet when September 11th happened. Let them recognize, help them to appreciate. Let them tell them how we felt. I remember the shirt I was wearing. I remember where I was, how I felt, what the weather was like. These are all things that just go back to that old saying. People will forget the things you say. They'll forget the things you do, but they'll never forget the way you made you feel. Keep that in the back of your mind. Remember that feelings are an important thing. We're all relying on each other to get through this.
Without a doubt. Eric Rittmeyer, the Emotional Marine, as always, some great advice. Do you have a website to go to? Because we know you have a ton of helpful things to add.
I do, Scott. Thank you for that. And there's lots of free downloads on there, too, for anybody that might need a little bit of help right now. It's mentaltoughness.speaker.com. You're the man. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Eric. Thank you. Lindy, over to you.
Thanks, guys. Still ahead of billionaires' big idea for a